Mentors are such an important part of the founder's journey. And in the hardest of times, they can guide you in making your next move. They understand the highly unpredictable, sometimes traumatic, difficult road one has to go down to build a successful company.
Our guest today is actually one of our mentors and has had a whirlwind of a journey building and supporting multiple ventures over the course of his career. His name is Edward Kim.
In addition to being our former professor and catalyst for other startups at Wayne State University and beyond, he is also a serial entrepreneur, investor with K5 Velocity Ventures, AVG Deep Tech Venture Fund, and former global head of innovation at Fiat Industrial Company. He has taught us valuable lessons based on his own successes and failures about the importance of diving deep, finding your why, listening when something isn't working, and how perseverance is the determining factor for who becomes a change maker.
Now, Ed is once again embarking on the founder journey to build his company Rapella and is also launching Unreal Basecamp, a program to create the next generation of entrepreneurs. And after that unbelievably long list of accomplishments, let's get started. So, we really want to hear your elevator pitch. So, who is Ed and what is he passionate about?
Oh my goodness. So currently, thank you very much, first of all, for the invitation. It's so good to see you guys. It's been a couple of years, I think, at least, right? So I'm very proud of what you're doing and talk about the executing the entrepreneur spirit and the mindset in terms of, doing this. I think it's fantastic. Currently, right now, my focus is on continue to be focused on the developing and supporting. I'm supporting and developing innovators and the entrepreneurs who wants to solve a problem and bring disruptive ideas and the technology to the market. In addition to that, I'm very passionate about. I don't want to call it teaching, but bring the opportunity to bring opportunity to introduce the experience of being an entrepreneur and learning and teaching some of the foundational thought process and framework to help guide whether students or the experienced business people or the technologists to help them instill that entrepreneurial mindset. And so idea behind this is not to help you or push the individual to become an entrepreneur, but it's really about the developing the framework and mindset that individual can apply either if they want to do a startup or start a business, they can use, but same set of a skill set, mindset, and the technique can be applied for you to become an entrepreneur as you go work for a corporate world as well. So I think it's beneficial skill set and the foundation. So I'm very passionate about putting together a platform or organizations who are dedicated to providing that kind of a service, and supporting them is my primary goal right now.
I love that, especially that you talked about entrepreneur, because many times I think in society, there's a huge push for entrepreneurship when you actually can make an amazing impact, working under a corporation who has tons of resources, and maybe you're someone who's a visionary and you can use those resources to really create a larger impact. So I'm happy you touched on that. And I want to call you Professor Kim because I'm just so used to this. So
thank you. I kind of like it.
Yeah, I'm like, this is Professor Kim. And so this is really special for us too, you being here today, because as we were talking about, who we wanted to reach out and who's made a personal impact within our entrepreneurship journey, you definitely were someone that we're like, yeah, we have to get them on, and but also share with others, kind of the insight and advice that you've given us. So we were also curious, like, how did this start for you? I know we kind of know a little bit about your background and community, but how were you inspired to go down this road of entrepreneurship? Was this when you were a kid? Like, kind of walk us through that.
Okay, well, I certainly can do that. So I never set out to be an entrepreneur. As a matter of fact, I was discouraged to be an entrepreneur, mainly because I'm an immigrant, grew up in Hamtramck, right? So I was surrounded by immigrants, whether they're from Poland or from Yugoslavia or from all over the world. And when you look at the immigrant community, they're trying to make come to the U.S. and try to make a living for themselves. And many times that they don't have the opportunity to go work for a corporation or established business. So their focus is always on, okay, what can we do? I mean, they hustle and they get some of but mainly they typically start businesses, and in my family was no different. So we started a number of different small businesses, and we're not talking about tech startups, right? We're talking about the mom and pop shop, corner store, and we failed at 2 or 3, right? And finally, the last one we did was it became sustainable business that afforded me the education and my family, my sister's education, and of course, that immigrant families or whoever is that so what they recommend you do is that don't go into business, go get a job at a large company and get a good salary and get benefits and just have a comfortable life. So that was my background. Now, having said that, so I eventually going to work for those companies that my parents wanted me to go work for, one of the OEMs and a couple of the big companies, right? And I did fairly had a decent career and moving up and typical corporate track. And but what occurred to me was that I was actually ruined by my experience as a part of being a family that had run businesses, right? Which means that part of that is you have to be really adaptable, right? And you can never, you can't really let your get comfortable, because you have to always look out for any change in the market conditions or the demographics or whatever that may be. So you're always looking for the data points, and you have to be adapt and come up with execution that you have to always watching the trend and whatever you call it. But that mindset never changed when I got a job at the large company. And so one part I forgot to mention is that when I graduated with the BA, I had an opportunity to be a financial analyst at either a bank or one of the OEMs. And when I talked to my friends, and it didn't sound too interesting. It wasn't too interesting in terms of what they did every day. So I ended up getting a job at a small consulting company. You call it startup nowadays, but we call that the NewCo. And then that actually, I had a lot of fun. Right out of school, I was given a lot of responsibilities. I was in charge of developing a product and have absolute control over the outcome and success of the product line. Now I grew out of that company, and so I ended up going to work for a big company. And what I realized was that I was doing well in my career, but I had no visibility or the very small control over the outcome of the project. Right. So I moved up in my career, and when I got to like director level and whatnot, and I still wasn't happy with how I wanted to contribute. And so I took what I learned from the corporate environment and decided to go off and do my own. And so when I left my corporate job, I was at a VP level and early 20s, I think 30s. And so I thought I thought it was kind of, okay, I know what I'm doing, and I've done pretty well, not large corporate, and I moved up in career-wise, and I got a good title and good salary. So I figured, so I can do this on my own, no problem. And then, so I left the career, I did a good paying job, and started my first company, which was a consulting company, and which turned into a technology company by the time I exited. But that probably was the hardest thing I have ever done in my life, especially being successful in the corporate world. Almost none of that translate into being successful, being an entrepreneur. And so basically what helped me survive is going back to my root of being a part of a family business, in terms of having the intestinal fortitude and the taking risks and learning fast. And you call that failing. I think one of you mentioned it earlier about the failing forward. And the one thing I realized was that it's not just failing forward. It's about the if you go, I call this nowadays. I think we talked about it during my class. What I call a killer experiment, is that the push yourself in a way that you can get a clear outcome and learn from it. If it doesn't work, learn from it and move. So that's something that helped me out a lot. And my first year, I was making a pretty good salary. And my first year of my selling business, I kid you not, I made $5,000. And I'm not talking about $5,000 take home pay, $5,000 revenue. So it was a challenging opportunity, but I ended up loving it. So that company grew to be, in 3 years, we did a little over $30 million. And so the journey to that is something that unless you go through the experience, it's almost that you can't understand. And now, having said that, people say, well, you did pretty good hitting that revenue, but the process of the journey and the amount of work that you have to do, which is not about just you, because of a lot of times they always hard work pays off and blah, blah, blah. But hard work is what I call a price of entry, right? If you're not planning on working hard, then, not just being an entrepreneur, anything. So hard work is a price of entry. You don't get extra credit for doing hard work, because I was working just as hard, making 5,000, to working just as hard, making some more money, and sometimes working just as hard, just as a volunteer work. So what I found was developing relationship, taking chances, validating your hypothesis, and being able to pivot. And one of the examples I want to give you is I studied this company I'm talking about was started in Michigan. And it was pretty clear to me, nobody wanted my solution in Michigan. So what we did was something very, very dramatic. I picked up the company and took it overseas and completely changed our customer segment, which was the established large OEMs, because our value proposition is that we can deliver the same solution you are purchasing 30% cheaper and 30% faster. And so talk about the product market fit not being there. So I thought we had a very clear value proposition, but obviously the market didn't appreciate it. So we took it overseas and we targeted a completely different segment. So we targeted, I call it the second tier OEMs, companies such as you've probably heard of now, but back then nobody heard about, which is companies like a Tata Automotive, Renault, Peugeot, and the Volkswagen overseas. So that helped us completely change our trajectory of our the revenue, the business model, and the revenue. But how I got there, it was that I developed a relationship. I reached out to people overseas, I recruited engineers, and basically initially, I put myself first as a person who can lead this thing. It was very obvious to me I could not do it alone. So the hard work did not pay. Hard work just made it harder. So I put my focus on okay, what is the gap that I need to fill, and how do I do that? And I created the value proposition, not on the business, but value proposition for me about myself to now my goal was recruiting right people, recruiting right capital, and recruiting the right customers. right? And the one thing, the pivotal thing I had to do was I came to realization I couldn't do it here, so I just packed up and left. So that means that so part of the entrepreneurship is that there's sometimes that you have to go through what I call a very traumatic event, and not get scared off by it, but meet that challenge. And you have the intestinal fortitude to make that happen, and you trust yourself that you know even if you fail, you're gonna find a different way to figure that out. So it's a long-winded story, but that's what got me started. And so I had a couple other startups since then. Some were just as good, some I have failed, but that's part of the journey, right?
So I guess going off all of that, and there were so many great lessons in what you just said that I know I'm going to take away from that, just in terms of making sure that you're not letting obstacles scare you off and you're continuing down your journey and figuring out how to make it work. But going off of what Dominique said about early experiences playing a part in influencing what you do down the road, when you just talked about all of your experiences sort of in the corporate world, and then how that transitioned into starting something and what lessons you were using from your past to start that thing. What were some of the lessons, like specifically, that you think helped you the most from your past starting your very first company?
So yes, so corporate experience was very good. So it was good complement to my entrepreneurial desire. Because I envy you guys right now because of there's a tremendous resources, not only availability of capital for the early stage, and also all these programs and services. Back when I started, which was ancient time ago, there wasn't anything. So either you had to learn yourself, and there was no guidance or mentorship that you can get. So what helped me out was, so being a part of a small business, that you really learn to focus on what are really key things that you have to focus on. Like there are very few, right? So my background is a finance guy, so I'm biased towards some of the finance metrics, but I almost never talk about profits. So for me, it's always about the sustainable cash generation. Right, and the other now, having said that, that was kind of amateurish way of looking at it, being a small business. But what I was taught from some of the corporate experience is, and one other company that I had worked for is now called the Accenture. Back then it was Anderson Consulting. I really came up with the methodology, how they operate their projects. There's a specific foundation methodology, which means a discipline. And the same thing with the Ford Motor Corporation. So I joined Ford Finance, and mainly because at the time, Ford had the best corporate finance group in, I think, North America. So when you go to MBA and trying to go to finance, it's usually like one of three, like GE and Pepsi and Ford at the time. Was that another thing I learned from that was, they are very data driven. So it's about the you have a milestones, or some of the targets you hit. So they focus on the variance of what you targeted versus what you did, and they explained why the difference, right? Difference between why did you do better, or why did you not do as well. So that gave me a different framework in which how I manage not only my business, but any projects. So that gave me a solid foundation, and the technical foundation. I talked about financial technical foundation, and also the methodology that really helped me to go back. And when we talked about there are so many different variables and risks you're taking, but that helped me to concentrate and focus on using the methodology in terms of applying those. So how do I adjust, and how do I measure when I'm doing well or when I'm not doing as well? So it really gave me the discipline and framework. And so that really helped me out. So ideally, once again, I'm biased in terms of who becomes a really good entrepreneur is that the somebody who has some experience. So if you get a chance to work with companies that has a really solid foundation and methodologies, I think that's a good base starting point for you to really go and take the entrepreneur journey. But I know that's not the I mean, that's one of the way, right? But for me, it worked for me. And once again, just going back, an entrepreneur and the organization that I worked for gave me an opportunity to do many different type of projects. So even though I was a finance person, when I was at Ford, I was able to work at manufacturing, purchasing, which all have a different challenges, even within the under is a big company, but they all have a different challenges and the complexity, right? So that helped me, and I was afforded a chance to not just do one job for 5-6 years. I was be able to do different jobs, so that also gave me some background. So being a corporate definitely helped me to be an entrepreneur. But that also made me realize that the corporate life wasn't up for me, because at one point I wanted to run the show, and obviously big company it's a little bit different, right?
I relate to when you talk about corporate America and not feeling that was a place where you felt like you fit. I felt like that too. I almost felt like sometimes I had to be robotic, act a certain way, and I was like, wow, this is so unfortunate, because I feel like I'm wearing a mask, going to work, and I'm not able to really connect, how I want to, right? So, but then I also agree too that starting out in corporate America really helped instill the foundation of business acumen, within me to understand things. So I was able to take the opportunities they gave me. I started out in sales. So working with like the Walmarts, Krogers, and Targets, I was able to use that to speak to those store managers and help them grow their business. But most of all, I learned the professionalism. And when working with different like student organizations, I always try to let them know, like, make sure you're coming in professional, you're on time, your PowerPoint decks are clean and crisp, and you're getting to the point of what you need, right? Without having, sometimes we'll get caught up in explaining things and it seems like we're giving a page essay, with certain things. So I thought that was really good. And I was also curious about, I know you spoke about different experiences throughout your career, but what are some of the most pivotal ones you think that really helped you gain that experience and insight to become the mentor in residence at Wayne State for entrepreneurship and innovation, and also, as a partner, for your investment firm as well?
Right. So one of the things, oh boy, that's a big question. There's several pivotal points in my life that guided me to this point, especially my desire to help, or at least provide some support point for those people who wants to be an entrepreneur, or who wants to solve a big problem and either start a business or in the career and corporate world, how they can stand out. I want to share that, but they all kind of leads me back to the mentors I had found in the course of my career, because all the opportunities I had, it really comes down to making connections with people that has really inspired me, as well as gave me guidance. Even today, even now, I met a couple of individuals whom I consider to be a trusted advisor. My first pivotal moment was that the person who, going back to what helped me out, was that a gentleman who gave me my first job out of college. So instead of going to work for a bank or the car company, and this gentleman who who started his first company and this consulting market research consulting company, and then producing some informational products that I think at the time was before there was internet, Google. It was a, there was a big gap, and he built it. So he started as my employer. Then I was spent about few years there, and I moved on to Anderson Consulting or Accenture, and he remained as my mentor. Then we kept the relationship, and he became a mentor. And where that, for example, when I was as I told you, I was struggling a little bit after my first startup. And one first thing you realize being an entrepreneur is that, especially when you're starting, it's a very, very lonely journey. Where that when you're a company, you got a ton of people, and even when you do well or not do well, there's always people around you. And when you're an entrepreneur, and especially when you're the founder, it's a lonely situation, because there's nobody else that you can go, either go talk to and cry to or complain to. So this is a gentleman that no matter how bad the situation was, when there was nobody that would even understand what I was going through or even support me, he always answered my calls, right? Every time, good or bad. And sometimes the bad was really bad. So he was a German, and then as I become more successful, then he became my business partner and co-investor, and now he asked me for my advice. So our relationship spans about almost 30 years, which I'm sad to say because that makes me old. But having said that, that's the first person. And so having a mentor or trusted advisor, I think is absolutely critical, because of whether you're entrepreneur or intrapreneur, and going back to what you said, Dominique, is that all the positives of this large organization that gives you professionalism, business acumen, and training and whatnot. But on the other side, exactly what you said, it is a box. There's a role you got to stick with and play. And when you decide to do something different, that you also need somebody who can bounce off and say, hey, you know what, Dominique, you're not crazy, right? So having that kind of sounding board and trust advisor, to me, is that every pivot or pivotal moments I had, there was always somebody like that. And so I think one of the I think Optimize Wayne, I gave a speech about the developing a network. And that was one of the things that I mentioned. It's about when you're looking, when you need to go out and meet people, you need to obviously network, but part of which is that you have to create a value proposition yourself. Because I know there's a lot of people talking about you have to mentor, you got to go get mentors and whatnot, but you have to present yourself. And I think, Dominique, you talked about it, is being professional, because you are the value, you are the message of you, and you have to project and have enough quality as a person and character that the people, like those people that you want to emulate and support, wants to come in and develop a relationship with you. So so part of that is a skill set, it's a mindset. And I think the one thing I said that the Optimized Wayne is you got to give, you got to be willing to give an opportunity for other people to want to return what you give, right? So I think you have to invest in yourself and the time to do that. But the pivotal moment, having the right mentor, was a big thing for me. As I said, and it's every chance I get, I look for quality people that I can help. In turn, and a lot of times, knock on wood, always those people came back to me, either refer me to somebody or they became my trust mentor. So that's highly the priority. And the other thing is that the understanding about, as you're doing the killer experiments and the value proposition, validation. And I'm not talking about the technology perspective, but your business model. And the question is that question is that when the moment comes, would you know when you have to make that decision to do the course correct? How would you know, right? How would you know? And what are some of the outcomes, some of the hypotheses you're testing? So every pivotal moment that happened to me, whether I had to pick up and go somewhere else, or I decided to leave my comfortable job and start something new, or for example, going from the startup world to now the more of the role I have as a mentors and the more of a teaching aspect of it. And I didn't do that consciously because I had to do it. And one thing I didn't forget to mention is that the pivotal moment was that I had some health issues, and I had to because I couldn't keep doing keep working on my startup at the time, and there are some other issues that driving it, but I had to find a different course of what I was doing, mainly what I had to do because of my health was bad and my business was not, it was going through some challenging time. And that forced me to rethink, what do I have to do? So at the time, what I realized was that the state of Michigan at the time was this venture ecosystem, and the startup that's starting to gain momentum in the 2012 and 2013. And so I had to make a change in how I can use my skill set, my interests, and how I can continue doing what I'm doing and staying sharp. So that's how I became more on the being a mentor, and it became to work at the institutions and became a quasi investor. But mostly I was interested in helping other people. So that was a pivotal moment, but it was caused by my health. But the thing is that the decision I had to make is that, well, what do I do? So I completely pivoted my applying my skills into something completely different. So that's a couple of examples.
I just wanted to share, I'm just so happy that you focused on having self-awareness, but not just self-awareness, you have the willingness to actually pivot. And I think that many times when we, as founders, we're visionaries. So we're coming in, we're presenting an idea, and when we receive pushback, sometimes we're automatically resistant to it because you're like, no, this is going to work and I can see it. But being able to have that willingness and openness to shift and pivot and be who you need to be at that time, I think is huge, especially seeing where the world was going at that time. You said, what, 2013?
Yep.
Yeah, I thought that was really good. I'm sorry, Isha, I just had to say that.
Oh no, you're totally fine. I totally agree. I think that's so important. And we're going to talk even more about learning about when is the right time to either move on or pivot and things like that, and looking for those signals and making those decisions. So we're definitely going to keep talking about that more as well. But before we shift gears to your transition from sort of founder to also becoming a funder, because that's sort of looking at things from a different lens, you kind of talked about some of those really bad times building your first company or companies. But I kind of wanted to dive into that a little bit more and talk about if there were any obstacles that taught you some really, really huge lessons that kind of just stayed with you, and what were those lessons as you kind of shifted gears and moved into this new kind of era of taking on another role as well.
Right. Oh man. So once again, I am so envious of you guys. Even the topics, the contents I taught in the classes, you guys took, I made every single mistake, every not to do that was taught in the class when I first started, right? I thought I had a good idea. I thought I had a product. I thought what we were doing was innovative, that customers they would just wanted us with the money, that when I say we can produce the same thing for 30% less and 30% faster, who would not like that, right? Crickets. No customer discovery, no validating the business model or the value proposition. And so you name it, I made every single mistake. And somehow I survived. But if I had to do it all over again, and I probably would have saved a couple of years of my life, and also the I would have done it a little differently, one of which is that this concept of raising money, right, and scaling business, because I was old school back then. You know what? Hard work. I have this beautiful baby and hard work, and everybody's gonna love it, and I'm gonna do it myself, including I'm gonna fund it. And why would I get any money from anyone else? And the concept of scale was, I don't even know what the heck that is. I just want to make money, 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 right? So I was so in terms of applying, if I have to go back and do all that, and so what I was teaching, and what not only myself, and a lot of books have been written about the agile startup and the lean startup and all that. I'm a pretty big disciple in those the methods and concept. Now, so having said that, I think that my past mistakes definitely as frame of reference to those data points and some of the techniques and whatnot, because it's not just reading the technique, everything you do that's going to guide you there. But the transition I made was one reason, because I had to, because of my health reason. But second thing was, I thought I had a voice in terms of how I can help that add to those community of people, whether founders, and the technologists or innovators or whatnot, they want to do this. And I thought I could add meat to the bone, meaning that there's the structure, all the things that's being taught at school and through the workshops and all the mentors giving you. I thought I can add more context in which that way I can add the real life situation or how you apply some of the concept in a meaningful way because of my background. And the other thing was that obviously I'm a business person. So even if I couldn't be an operator, I thought I could help those the courageous people who are willing to take risk. And if I was able to help, and that's when I said, maybe if this requires some seed funding, get them started. And I thought I could be that person to do so. And so that's how I kind of transitioned. And one of the other reason, which I the hindsight was a mistake, was that I thought I decided to go to where I thought all the innovation was happening. So I thought I'd go to research institutions. They have all the IPs and all the smart people. So only thing I have to do is that give some, sprinkle some wisdom that I have, and here's some seed round, and they just make it happen. So talk about the teachable moment. It did not work out at all. So most of the stuff I ran into has a long runway, and it's so early, they weren't ready. And I didn't realize at the time the academic world and the real world, academic world and the business world and the world that we live in, there was a huge gap. And the other thing was that they spoke different language. It's like British English versus American English. We're talking the same thing, and so the moment of the truth came when I had a really incredible meeting with this faculty. We were really excited about his technology. Let's get commercialized. And I thought, you know what? Not only would I invest in it, I'd be the startup CEO, which I wasn't ready to do, but that's how excited I was. And the professor said, you know what? Let's have a next meeting. And mind you, this meeting was happening in April. He said, okay, let's meet next time. We'll just really make this happen. And he offered up the date of October 15th. As the next meeting. So that's when I knew that I need to become more of not just going into being an investor. It has to be a combination of not only investing, but I have to invest time and effort to incubate and harness and help kind of be part of the roadmap to actually commercializing. And that's what got me to be, it started as a kind of initially as an investor, but that's what got me transformed into more of what I call a Sherpa. So not a mentor, not a coach, as Sherpa, because which I'm just setting up for the next topic we'll talk about. But Sherpa is not somebody just come in and parachute and gives you, hey, Isha, you're doing a great job. Maybe you should do X, Y, Z. And I talk to you 3 months from now to how you're making progress. What Sherpa does is if you're climbing a mountain, that poor Sherpa goes to the top with you, right? They don't just come in and say, hey, you know what? You have to train for 30 days, hike, and carry this and blah, 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 which is great, which is a great resource. But Sherpa mindset is the fact that he or she is there with you, because that kind of developing the relationship is a big part of it. So that's what transformed me into the role that I'm in right now.
Ed, are you writing a book?
No, that would be a horrible book.
No, seriously, I'm sitting here like, how can I get back into one of his classes? So seriously, I'm like, the book could be called the one thing you mentioned earlier, I wrote it down because it was so good. Hard work is the price of entry.
Right.
And I'm sitting here, you have so many acronyms to different things, and I learned some of them, while I was in your class, but I mean, hard work is the price of entry. It could be the name of the book.
Yeah.
Seriously, this is so good. I'm just like taking it all in, and
Nice.
yeah.
Well, then again,
Yeah.
you have to say nice things.
No, seriously. When I was talking to Isha, sometimes when we're talking to different funders and founders around the city, it's like we get a little caught up in the conversation because it's so good, and we're learning too, at the same time. So I'm just sitting here like, wow. So I just had to let you know that, because I'm like,
I appreciate it.
yeah, you should consider it seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so good. And you set us up great for the next question. You were talking about your experience as a partner of the strategy advisory and investment firm, and kind of looking at what the climate has been, not only in the investment world as far as the cultural climate, and many investment firms are shifting to make sure they have different diversity metrics. I wanted to talk to you about, do you even believe, like, not just with diversity, but is there a standard, a benchmark versus a standard strategy when investment firms are looking to fund different type of startups that are scalable?
Wow. So let me see if I understood you. Are you talking about that pertaining to the underrepresented groups, or more in general?
I think both. So
Okay.
seeing what's been going on from a diversity standpoint, there's been so many articles just over the last year alone about how many investment firms or VCs are looking to change their metrics to ensure they're making funding more accessible, for underestimated founders. And I wanted to just get your thoughts on that. In addition to, like, part two of that question is, do you even think there's a benchmark versus standard strategy that many investment firms use to invest in startups?
Wow. So I'm going to start off by saying I am probably not the most qualified person to answer the question, but I can respond to that from my experience as both part of the investor side, and also someone who's trying to raise capital.
Right. That's really good.
So I cannot speak from the perspective of the venture capital or entity perspective. So I think, especially now, there is and there has been recently the drive towards to get a better representation of not only the funding founders, but even from a makeup of the venture partners. There's more diversity, the awareness, and I think that's happening. I think that's great. And I also know that there has been efforts to increase the underrepresented and also, as you mentioned, underestimated founders. And so definitely I do hear about them. I do from some of the meetings I attend and what I read and whatnot. So that's for sure. So definitely there are more of a social impact ventures, and there are, for example, like one of the venture groups in the state of Michigan is focused on the funding women-owned and the women-owned or women-led ventures. So certainly those opportunities are there. So I think that's good. From my experience is that I guess I'm biased towards the disruptive solutions or technologies and matched up with the team. And I consider the team, and whether it's made up of diversity group or a diversity partners or the women-owned or gender side, the team and the team chemistry and the potential of the team is extremely important. And as a matter of fact, I think I have a saying that which the researchers hate when I say it, is that the technology I can almost find anywhere, but the team is much more difficult. That especially the CEO that can lead and be able to adapt, because of so that in the combination of the solution and the team is really the sweet spot, from my perspective, we consider. But having said that, I look at the last 3-4 investments, or either I have co-founded or I just invested in, and they all been either female-led or it's very diverse. My companies are but there is so. It's not we go out of our way to find the diversity team with the diversity and whatnot. It just naturally happens that way because, from my experience is that the most teams that are really effective and the best chemistry and whatnot happens to have a very diverse team. So it just happened naturally. So Repella is someone we recruited. It's a female-led company, and we call it the captain. So we don't use the CEOs and all the other titles because I feel uncomfortable using the term. So we call it the captain. So
you noticed that. We thought that was pretty cool.
The companies that the projects we went through your class, like Brand FX, is a female-led, and the whatnot. So from our perspective, it's kind of natural. But having said that, we're also trying to raise funding. And I don't think we ran into a situation that we got a bonus points for having a diverse team or a female-led, right? Maybe except the one venture group is because it was specific. They only invest in female-led. Other than that, so we haven't experienced it. And certainly that we haven't gotten the plus from given it didn't come across like they have an incentive to invest in us over others, because at the end of the day, their metric is to get the return on investment for their partners, right? So if the team is made up in which that the best scenario to provide them return on their investment, I think that's still the top priority.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, I have not had a very good track record of raising money in Michigan. So, for example, like Repella, all the interest we're getting is from outside of Michigan, right? So hopefully it's staying with the topic, the question that you're asking, but you go to different places, they may have a different, or they have a different weighted weight on the making the decision. So opinion I'm giving you is from the lens of the state of Michigan.
So I think at the end of the day, the strategy or benchmark that most investment firms look at is just the return of investment, like despite what the team looks like. And I think that's the big overarching thing here biggest takeaway.
Yeah. But the one thing I do want to add is if you go back to our class, is that when we talk about customer discovery, remember that I also treat investors as customers, customer segment. So just as that when you do a customer discovery, there's different category of customers, blah, blah, blah. So you would have to, as of somebody who's trying to raise funding, you would have to do that homework, because investors to us and people who are trying to raise money is that if you look at the potential investors as a customer, how you want to approach them. So not all customers are potential customers are one you really want as your customer, right? So you do have to do homework. You do have to profile them. You do have to find out. And once you start looking at the investor as someone you want to get money from, but you start looking at them as your customer, so value proposition you're bringing, which is not just about the solution, the problem you're trying to solve, but the value proposition, remember, is you and your team as well. And you want to find the right investors that who value that. So it's the same thing. I know it's such a cliche of saying it. It's all about the product market fit. And in this case, you're the product, right? So you can't just make a blanket statement in perspective. But having said that, mostly true is that they look at the return on investment, whatnot. But it's your job and to find the right market, find the right. But having said that, I think that awareness is increasing, and I think it's going to continue to get more opportunity for underrepresented, underestimated group to participate.
Yeah, I think so. And there's also a resource called the Startup Investor Matching Tool that a founder, I believe she's Latina, that she actually created that. So it helps actually bridge the gap between the underestimated founders and have them match with investors. So I thought that was pretty neat. And
yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, it is. It's really good. I'll share it with you too. I think it's a really great tool.
Yeah, I mean, I really like, first of all, the point that you made about founders doing their customer discovery before going to raise a round, because I don't think that's talked about enough, but it's so important because obviously you're asking for money and different investors also have different values. So you want to find investors that match up with your own company's values. And I think that's really important. And also, I think there's definitely something to be said about kind of what you said along the lines of like having a diverse team, and those diverse viewpoints really are beneficial in making key decisions about strategy and even pivoting and just what direction you want to go with for the company and setting those values. So I think that was definitely a really interesting point. And we talked about that a little bit in our first episode because that had more of a diversity focus. So I think going off of that, kind of transitioning into talking more about your more recent ventures, what would you say was different about your founder journey the second or third time around after you already had experience with, the first one, the really bad times, and then also helping founders and being a support system for them and giving them that initial seed money, already having all of that under your belt? How did that kind of influence your journeys?
Yeah, so one thing I had to learn as having I have many areas of growth opportunities, right? And one thing that I had to really develop was patience. Because of the fact that because you think, from my perspective, well, I've done this before, I know what to do, and blah, 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 and why can't you see it? And just do what I say kind of mentality. It's that I realized that's not very healthy. And the other thing was that where either every startup that either I co-launch or I have invest in or I mentor, that my goal is not to be the CEO. So which means that I need to have the team or the captain of the team to be obviously intelligent, right? And they obviously, some of them even have a pretty high EQ, emotional quotient, that they can. And but most of them, especially the ones I work with, are very technology based, and they tend to have surprisingly tend to have a very low what I call AQ, or the adaptability quotient. So they're flexible, being able to pivot, being able to gauge when to change course, and something I talk about. So I'm a big fan of a game theory. So game theory is like chess, right? So one of the examples, especially Repella, because it's a marine coding technology. So I use this analogy, is that when you're in a regatta or your sailboat race, and when you're following the lead, you do everything exactly same as the lead. Guess what? You're always going to be in second place, right? So you have to figure out a way to disrupt the flow so you can cut through. So that mindset is kind of a lot more challenging than you think it would be. And for me, that's a common sense. And so where I'm going with that is I'm trying to find a balance between not being the CEO, but provide the right opportunity for the CEO and the team to embrace that the lean startup methodology, or the typical, the cliches, and not just cliches, but the true, the discipline and all the things, the techniques, and talk about and help them teach. So my focus is more on the trying to teach and expedite the learning curve for the team. So that's one of the things that's very different than my first startup and first or second startup, is aware that I'm focusing on how do I get these teams to become a very high performing startup team. And one of which is having the patience to let the team develop, and giving them opportunity to learn from learn through the experience, and things like that. So that's a little different because of now, having said that, a lot of these folks, the team I work with, they're exposed to a lot more knowledge about how to be what you have to do in a startup environment than past. So this a little easier. So going back to the concept of Sherpa, is that I have Repella I talked about. There are a couple other companies that we're incubating. Yeah, so my main focus is developing the team, because the technology is it's always interesting, but without the team, none of that happens, right? So my focus is more on the investing in the team and time, money, and as such.
Ed, I think by the time we finish up today, the conclusion will be that you need to write a book.
Hey, maybe a executive summary, but I think that's all I gotta get.
Executive summary. I love it. I love it. How can you ensure that part of your company's culture is actually creating an impact and putting people over profit? In the past, you've started several businesses or invested in businesses that really focus on this metric here. So we're just curious to get your thoughts on that.
Okay, great question. For me, as a business person, there are certain metrics, and almost none of the metrics. These metrics are mostly process-driven, methodology metrics. So when you talk about I think that how you phrase it was the people over profit, or in this case, when you're raising money, because one of the things I hear almost makes me cringe a little bit is, especially in the very inexperienced startup and the mentor engagement, is that you have to do this so you can get investment from VC. That makes me cringe. And just as well as the reason is, for me, whether it's a profit and your ability to raise money, attract money, and is an outcome that results from executing your stage gates of your roadmap, right? So metrics and methodology. So without having now, first of all, developing the culture from the get-go is extremely important, because that sets the expectation of the behavior, whether it's the financially driven behavior or the metrics or the operational metrics and whatnot, that you have to have that, whether you call it culture, expected behavior in terms of communication, in terms of how you treat people, in terms of how you manage your projects and what kind of milestones you have to deliver. And those are all the milestones. So if you hit those milestones, and provided that you have the roadmap, flexible roadmap, and that you can learn from, that the profits and raising money is a fallout from that. It's a positive results from executing certain things right. And so without having the people oriented the game plan, and hopefully you have the right leadership that would not only encourage it and embrace it and reward them, that it's really difficult for you to be successful. Maybe initially, but to develop a very sustainable and attract the kind of quality people, not only recruit into your team, but the quality investors, right? That who shares your value, going to add, in addition to money, they can help you grow. So for me, it's not a profit of people, mainly because you can't get to profit without having that alignment happen first. So for me, it's not even a question, because what I'm measuring is the process. It's a process, and making sure you do check metrics throughout the journey over and over and over again. So you're continually looking to pivot. And I don't want to use the term pivot too much, but I use the term velocity a lot. When I was in the corporate, and a lot of people use speed, and that always made me feel a little bit comfortable, because speed only focus on the one direction of metric, right? So you go fast, but you don't check yourself, and you end up being somewhere much further away in the wrong spot than you do. So some people ask me, what's the difference between velocity and speed? Velocity is speed with direction. It's a measure of a vector, right? So that has to be built in your process and in the methodology of your company, right? So part of which is that whether it's people, financial, operational, that you have to continue to check and gauge the temperature and make sure that you are headed the right direction based on the most data points that's available. And that, for me, as a data-driven person, it doesn't change whether it's people, financial, operational.
Ooh, thank you. That was really good. And it helps someone like me being in social entrepreneurship, where oftentimes you don't fit into one particular bucket. So you often feel like, well, how do I measure, the impact value, right? And oftentimes, yeah, you do hear that, okay, people over profit, but I think looking at it from a perspective of looking at the process and what decisions you need to make to continue to move forward within that process,
right,
helps me a bit more than putting one over the other.
Yeah, so I'm not obviously I don't have a lot of background in not-for-profit, but having said that, when you look at it from process perspective, right, there's operational issue that you got to deal with, right, and one of which there's people issue you have to deal with, and there's the financial issue you're going to deal with. But when you frame your outcome as more of a not say the profit, because you're not for profit, but when you reframe it from the achieving the sustainability, that you're then the thing changes a little bit, right? So what do you mean by, you got to talk about what do you mean by sustainability, being able to create a sustainable operation, so just helping the community, and they're making a viable, at the end of the day, you're still a business model that you're running, right? You're focusing on profit, but once again, profit is it's outcome, and sometimes, I mean, you focus on the cash generation and how you're going to fund the operation. So I think there are ways in which you can very effectively measure what you're doing.
And so you've worked for several companies, invested in companies, and built companies from the ground up. So in terms of velocity, you're choosing a direction, you're following that, you're sort of following a certain pace and just trying to make as much progress as you can as you go. But when do you know when it's time to move on from one project to the next project, completely, like not even pivoting? When did you and how did you make those decisions? Because you've done a lot, like you've done several kinds of projects in several industries. And how can a founder tell when something isn't working, or when it's, time to, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to not be working for you to transition to another project, but when do you sort of know when that time is, and how can you gauge that?
Well, great question. So, I mean, there are obviously a lot more I have tried than some of the ventures I talked about, and so my several interests is there's a commonality, and so it appears that I have a lot of different interests, but my core value, core strength that I want to leverage it's the same. And my interest is that I look for innovation that can be disruptive, that may solve certain problems in the marketplace, and more importantly, is backed by, or either as my partner or co-founder, or somebody that can the support is that person coachable, work, do have good chemistry. I mean, that's more important. And everything else to me is a use case. So whether it's digital health, whether Repella, which is a marine coding technology, and some of the AI-based startups that we are going to start pretty soon, and the one I supported, and for me is just a use case. Especially if I have a really, really great partner or the founder, right? Because I'm going to depend on that person. Now, having said that, because of my background and my experience, that I know enough to be dangerous to take the opportunity and see if we can do something about it. So now, having said that, the great question about when do you know it's time to quit and move on to the next one. And I have several projects I started. Then the going back to, I think once again, going back to fail forward, but I'm a firm believer in the fail fast, right? Second best answer to when you ask somebody a question, whether it's you're trying to raise money or trying to get a date, going to dinner, the second best answer is fast no. So I know it's going to be a trap when somebody says, well, that's really interesting, but when you're ready, when you do this tic-tac-toe, come back to me and let's talk about it again. That is a slow death. And so when I first started, I hung on to that, right? But now through the customer discovery, so we put together a real quick business model, and put together elevator pitch, and even get to a certain prototype, and the response doesn't meet some of the hypotheses we had, does not meet, and we just without prejudice, I kill it, right? So I don't hang on to people who said, well, it sounds really interesting, and we'll take a look when you get to this point. And that to me is a sign. So I look for fast no gets me to this part of the failing fast is that the failing forward. Then I learn from it and move on to the next one. One of the things I'm not sure that another lesson I learned as an angel investor, I always think I can help from the other side. The one thing I learned is that it's not the finding a very special technology and trying to incubate the crap out of it. Sometimes it's all about the number of deals that you see. It's a volume at some point. And for me, going back to as the other side, I ask you, Dominique, I think about, here's I'm doing some of this is really cool, sounds really good. And what do you think? And I go and ask you, Isha, and whoever on the team. And I, based on the response, I have enough to say, well, maybe I should push this forward. Maybe I should kill it because I have 3 other things I can talk about. Right.
The fast no is a really big one.
Yep.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that helps you gauge. You should just keep it moving or spend some more time on something.
Right.
Be clear and distinct. And I think your core values that you mentioned is very clear and distinct about investing in innovation that disrupts the marketplace and solves a problem. And we're interested to learn about your personal core value. Like, how do you stay aligned with your purpose and what you feel you're meant to do? Do you have a mantra that's similar to the career-focused core goals or values that you shared with us?
Wow.
Yeah, we get a little deep.
Yeah. I may have to lay down on a couch. I think the main thing for me is I'm not afraid to fail. I am extremely curious about. I always approach from whoever I run into, any room I run into. I by expectation and my thought process that I'm amongst people who are smarter than me and who are a lot more interesting than I am. So my thought is always, I am curious. So now I am partial to, because I'm a geek and I have a very, I don't have a gift of gab. So usually it turns into some specific type and it has, it's about something you're doing, some new technology or some different topic. But I'm not afraid to learn and I'm really motivated to learn. So we talk about the blockchain and I just love that topic and nobody wants to talk about it. And someone told me, he's actually the oversight committee member, a very brilliant guy, and he's my age. And he and I were talking about how do we create a lightning network for the blockchain, the Bitcoin transactions and blah, 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 which I didn't know anything about till a month ago. So he goes to me, he goes, Ed, we're like a unicorn. I go, what do you mean? We're 2 old people talking about the Lightning Network and the Bitcoin transaction. So I love that. So, one before that, obviously, that there's a digital asset rendering using Unreal game engine, which I'm not a gamer. But something I found out just having this conversation, I found that, oh my God, I used to have 40 designers employed, I supervised, and I can have 3-4 students, high school students, train them for a month and using this platform and do what the 40 engineers are doing. I'm not going to tell you how many years ago, but 40 engineers are doing back then. And I'm thinking it's a new knowledge, new skill. I was excited about it. And going back to my original, at the beginning of this interview, talk about developing relationship. And now I have connections at people at the Unreal game engine. And I have, I'm working with the Accenture partner about this blockchain. So it just kind of builds on each other, but everything starts from I'm just curious. And I'm not afraid to look foolish by asking a question. And one of my failure was that about 80. I'll share it with you. Is that about 8 years ago, a gentleman who I worked with many years ago approached me about, hey, I like to do Bitcoin mining, and would you invest with me? And I was eating Mexican food at the time, and mid bite, I'm going, what the heck is Bitcoin? And how do you mine that out of the ground? So obviously I was an idiot, but having said that, we'll do something about it now, right? And so I left a lot on the table in terms of the money we could have made, but you learn from that, and I don't mind sounding stupid, but having said that, we'll do something about it in the near future.
Yeah, so I mean, you've clearly put a lot of time and energy into creating several innovative ventures in different industries, not just in one. And you mentioned recently that you've taken those experiences and have started developing Unreal Basecamp, which
Yeah.
is to instill an entrepreneurial mindset in people and to really help them develop the tech or business acumen they need to build something new. So tell us more about that. We're very excited to hear about it. And why do you believe that it's important?
Well, so we coined it Unreal Basecamp. So it's a combination of two. It's a combination. It's a marriage of a concept and the opportunity. And I had this idea about putting together a I don't want to call it incubator or boot camp or accelerator, but it's similar to replicating what we did in our classroom, bringing projects, turn it into kind of experiential learning factory, give them opportunity. And it was I was having a little difficult time doing it through an organization. And obviously I wanted to do through the Wayne State University and business school. So there are some interest doing that, but I thought there was just me being impatient and the fact that going through any organization, it takes a lot of hurdles you have to get over. And the other thing was I had to explain this concept to so many people. So I had in my network, I had connection with managing partner of Accenture and the technical fellow and at the General Motors, who's in the oversight committee of my Amtrak Advanced Computing. So over the social, we were having dinner and wine, and I pitched this idea about creating a base camp. So they said, what is a base camp? Is that base camp is I would love to put together a educational platform, and of course my background, the leveraging technology and the leveraging and the industry resource to create an educational training platform for underrepresented opportunity youth. I wanted to do it in this school, but I thought we could, if we can get the industry collaboration, I thought we could do that outside of any organized entity and do it ourselves, because I'm a business person and they are a business person. And so they embrace the idea of the base camp. And the base camp it's really about core concept is preparing for the life of climb, right? So you said, so everybody wants to start something in terms of startup and have a career going and whatnot, and they, let's just say they want to climb Mount Everest. And the one thing I learned is that it's very difficult to just from where you are now to climb Mount Everest, right? So there is a preparation to training, all that. So to climb any mountain, you get to the base camp. So getting to the base camp itself is a challenge. But once you get to the first base camp, you go to the second base camp, right? So we wanted to create that the base camp model, and the part of which was that another thing that I thought there was a gap in terms of what all these incredible people are trying to do, supporting the educating and the job creation and all that, in order even like a hackathon and boot camps and whatnot. After they are done, there's always a question of now what. So I always start from the outcome first and kind of work backward, because those puzzles that you do in newspaper about finding path, and I cheat. I always start from the to end, which is totally not recommended. But from that perspective, we start with okay, so what can we do in terms of making it interesting enough and making relevant enough? And we don't want to repeat what's already out there. And most importantly, once they go through this experience, and what is the outcome? So we did a couple of things. We recruited Epic Games, Unreal, and we wanted to do with the technology, but obviously we didn't want to do anything really, really complex, but it's really interesting to students, which we thought, oh, gaming. What these students don't realize that when you're doing online gaming or any gaming, you actually create a mod. So these kids, even my students, I mean my kids, 13-year-old, they can create mods for the games they're playing. So what is mod? That's programming. They don't even know they're doing it. So we decided to use the Unreal, and the main the creator on the customer side is that people don't realize that some of the enterprises that started embracing integrating these gaming development platform into their enterprise system technology development platform. So why not match it up, put them through a training program, and which should be all it's because of Unreal game engine is really interesting. There's a virtual environment, digital rendering, digital asset creation, and we combine that with some of the techniques and the content that I taught at the classroom that you guys attended, simplify it, and the most importantly, that every student would have an internship waiting for them after they finish it. So we call that Unreal Basecamp. It's a collaboration between me, Accenture, GM, Unreal Game Engine, and Lenovo, and every student will get all the laptop, the headgear, and all that stuff. And that was done all ground up. I mean, from the ground up grassroots effort with the support from all the corporations. So going back to you're talking about Dominique, is that so this is basically what we want to do is that we want to create a not-for-profit entity. So we're using this as a pilot to validate this concept. And once we get the pilot is successful, we want to create a not-for-profit and go back to basically to make that sustainable. And we did this without any support. 3 guys sitting around came up with the concept and recruited all these companies to make that happen. It happened within like 16 weeks, right? So I'm pretty darn proud of it. And now, having said that, I'm just an architect, and there are a really smart group of people who's actually making it happen, executing it, and a huge kudos to Accenture. And they're providing a lot of project management support, and they took it and actually integrated into their own apprenticeship and network, right? So we're targeting the high school students, opportunity youth, which are college student age students, and possibly I'd like to bring in some Wayne State universities to participate in it. So that's what we call what we are launching, and it has nothing to do with the profit. It's everything to do with the 3 things. One is giving an opportunity to those people who don't normally get it. And number 2 is a focus on the future of a workforce. So we don't do, so purposely we picked Unreal Game Engine. It's about the augmented reality. It's about mixed reality. It's about digital asset creation. This is about everything to do with the future of a workforce, because there's so many people who's already teaching the basic, coding and the boot camps and some of the system, management, maintenance type of a skill set. So we purposely wanted to focus on these students, give an opportunity for the high-paying skill training, right? And the 3rd thing is that it has to be scalable. So we want to be able to do this over and over. So we're doing that. And it's pretty excited about this pilot. And I think this was presented at the Mackinac annual Mackinac conference this year too. So I think we're going to expand the size. Right now, we're going to start with the 10 students. So we already have them picked out almost, but we may be expanded to 20. So certainly that when we get to point to select students, additional students, I reach out to you guys. But the idea is that we want a ton of these, and so for this one, we call it Unreal because Unreal is providing supporting us. But the main thing is that this core concept is Basecamp. once again, it's about the preparing for the life of climb. It doesn't have to be career or whatever you want to do. It's about the getting to, once you get there, it's about being prepared for the challenge of a next journey, right?
We wanted to ask you, I know you mentioned a few of your failing forward stories, and your belief of failing fast. If you have to share one story that could provide some inspiration to a founder out there listening, that really shaped who you are, what would that be?
Wow, that's a deep question. I think one of the core, aside from being very curious, is now you guys getting to the really deep stuff here, but it's I always feel like I'm an underdog, right? And so you can either take that as something that would prevent you from trying, the fear of rejection or fear of the not being appreciated, is for me is having that, because because I'm naturally a very lazy person, so so I need daily or periodic motivation. And so for me, the thought of being an underdog, it just fuels me. It gives me a drive. And so on the negative side of it is that I always feel like I may feel like, oh man, they don't appreciate me, or they disrespecting me, blah blah blah. So I think that's natural for everybody. There's a slight sense of insecurity, and sometimes I think that's very good if you use it the right way. So for me, it's about especially because I always look for new type of situations, new technology. So I'm almost, there are things I know very well, but most of the time I purposely expose myself to situations where I'm not the expert. And so having that sense of vulnerability is actually driving me, right? So whether it's being an entrepreneur or day-to-day in whatnot, and trying to learn. So for me, that gives me a motivation and the energy to, once again, from my base camp to the next challenge, and always looking for the next challenge. And I think that's basically, I'm not sure that's a right positive way to motivate yourself, but it works for me.
Yeah, it's yours, and that's what matters. That's what makes you who you are and where you're at. So that makes sense.
All right. So thank you so much for joining us today, Ed. We were really excited for this conversation, and Dominique and I are really grateful that you were able to join us. And for those of you watching, please subscribe and check out the links in the description box. This conversation is also going to be available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. And we'll see you next time.